Hey Ryan,
Hey man, how are you?
good, good. Appreciate you taking the time to sit in with me on our TruPoint Talking Tech for this month. We are very happy to have a friend and a longtime partner, Ryan Harrelson from SimpliMeta. How you doing today, Ryan?
Can't complain one iota. I get to talk to you today, so that makes it a A+ day for me.
There you go. Well, obviously we use you guys in a lot of different ways for a lot of different things for many of our customers. Tell me a little bit about your personal background. How'd you end up?
Yeah, I mean, I started in tech at first time I got paid to do technology. I was 16 years old. I ran the first cables at my high school and built the first computer lab in my high school, and that's what kind of started me down the road of tech. Prior to that, I was going to go to Juilliard, perform on Broadway. That was always the hopes and dreams of my life was to perform on Broadway. I'm a long way from there. Um, so when I got out of high school, I got a contract to go and start doing post apartment complexes and doing some consulting contracts around doing Wi-Fi and building regional level Wi-Fi types of components. Moved into some other engineering projects. Before I moved over to the consulting side, my last job on the enterprise side, I was the global VP of IT for a large international firm. And I was really kind of unhappy with different things that I was seeing. And a company very similar to TruPoint came in to do a project for us as an advisor at the time. And I really liked what they were doing, and I wanted to see what I could do. So I jumped ship and moved into the consulting side and started running an engineering firm for them, and took the lessons I had from there and decided what I really wanted to do was a little less of some of the things that you guys do naturally, the helping and advising the clients, but where I really thought my skill was is in the actual implementations and the technical operations of those components. And so we started an organization to be able to partner with great organizations like TruPoint and do those implementations, do those installs, do all the technical operations, and take that off of the plate of these great organizations so they can focus on truly working with their clients. So that's kind of the short version of what got me to where I sit today.
Yeah, it's super interesting, especially the Juilliard part. So what aspect of I guess theater were you hoping to do? Is it singing, acting, all of it?
All the above, but primarily I just like when people look at me.
Well, you're still scoring in that way, right?
Yeah, for me, I've always loved I loved being the center of attention, and I've loved being able to just be very colorful, very vibrant, very flamboyant in the way you go about things. And so one of the hardest lessons I've had throughout the entire time of the channel, including one of your leadership, has been trying to take that personality and tame it down a little bit and bring it to table. But yeah, the dream was always go to Juilliard, perform on Broadway. I thought for sure that I was going to get to play in Les Mis. That was my dream, was to perform Les Mis on Broadway.
Very cool. Well, you talked a little bit about it, but I guess give me the 2 minute overview on Simply Meta as it stands today as an organization.
Sure. SimpliMeta, again, is born for supporting organizations like you guys and your clients. We basically took our business and broke it into four primary pillars of the company. So we have field services that is across the country. We're actually starting to move into Europe. We're starting to move into more Latin America. We've done some things in India. So we are attempting to spread and become more of a most of world organization around field services. Hopefully by mid 2026, we can have that kind of wrapped up. But that team will do just about anything you want to do in the field. Then the second pillar is our engineering professional services team. These are all senior level engineers. As you guys know, as most of your customers probably know, we do not have a managed services desk. We don't have a 1-800 call and talk to a tier one, talk to a tier two resource. We are an engineering implementations team. But that group is very broad, very big. It's engineering on demand. So that group, we have over 150 engineers on that group now, highly vetted across varying skill sets that you can engage. And our go to market with those guys is around a block of hours. We want to be able to be on demand. If you need us to come and help you configure one firewall, that's going to be hard to get to your leadership, create a contract, sign a contract, do a kickoff. It's a bit of a mess. And so the block of hours model on that side is allow us to really be an on demand resource with senior level engineering that you might need. The third division, as you go over, is our compliance and cybersecurity team. That group, we have an in-house CISO and an in-house compliance officer. So we work with a lot of SOC 2, CMMC, cybersecurity audits, things like that. And then the final pillar is we actually have a handful of cybersecurity products that we thought were unique to bring into the marketplace. So we've partnered with a company called SciFlare to bring them and be able to offer that to people, which we think they have a very unique SOC offering. And then we actually have a door access control offering that's an MRR based door access control. A lot of that was we do a lot of these SOC 2 audits. And one of the things they ask for is you need to have a documentation of every single person that comes in your office. How are you going to do that unless you want to pay a secretary to sit there for that one person that comes in a day? But, you know, so many people are remote nowadays. And so this comes in, it captures their faces, can align that and tag that. So we really needed something that could finish that kind of SOC 2 and CMMC audit. So we brought those two organizations in. So that kind of tells you what it is. The overarching theme is if you and your clients can decide you'll need to do something, we can implement it once you guys have kind of made your ideas and brought it together.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And I think we've used you guys in every one of those pillars, and then including AI app dev, right? Which I know
Yes,
is a
sir.
growing market for you as well. What I think is interesting is you guys are a good example, at least in my view, of identifying a need that wasn't being satisfied by the providers.
Mm-hmm.
We've had our own professional services implementation teams in-house for, as long as TruPoint's been in existence almost. But what we find is that, sometimes the project gets too technical, or it's a
Mm-hmm.
larger project than we can support in-house, and that's where you guys are a really good fit for us. Or it's very difficult to have all of the different skill sets. And I know some of our customer IT teams, when they're doing a migration, they may have the experience to do it, but they do it once every 5 years, once every 6 years. You guys are doing multiple times a month the same type of migration, so it's just a better
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
What along those lines are your four key differentiators? I mean, what makes you different in the market?
So I think, and it's so funny this comes up. I just had a conversation with our director of sales this morning about this. I think one of our biggest differentiators is everything that's been built in this business has been built for transparency. From the ground up, it's around transparency. And that you see in absolutely everything we do. So, you heard me talk about blocks of hours before. Selling fixed fee projects is far easier. It's easier to build the budgets. It's easier to do some of those components. It's easier to put that together. It's easier to track. Everything about that is easier. But in my mind, I wanted to create a world that says if I do 90 hours of work, I bill you 90 hours of work. If I do 50 hours of work, I'm going to bill you 50 hours of work. So, everything in the company, from the way we put everything together, is built to just be transparent and upfront with our clients, with our customers. So we don't always break the best news, and it may not be what you wanted to hear, but we're very quick to bring you the bad news. We're very quick to engage, and we want to make sure that we're being honest with what we think things are going to be. So I think I hate to kind of be a little cliche with a bit of a soft touch on that one, but I think that we've spent a long time trying to build an organization that, right, wrong, or indifferent, however we are succeeding in our projects, we're always very transparent. So that's one, and probably the one that I lean on the most, is whatever you do, it is our job to ensure we're informing our clients ahead of time what we think is going to happen and how we think things are going to work, and not going, well, you say it's going to go that way, we're just going to go with it. That doesn't feel transparent to me. So that's one of the areas that I think is a big, unique differentiator. I think if you look at the way that we're going about our engineering, like I said, we have over 150 engineers scattered across the globe that we can bring in to do skills. On top of that, we have the ability to recruit technical resources in Nairobi, Kenya, United States, UK, Croatia, India, and the Philippines. So we're actually able to go out and staff and build, whatever is needed if we're missing a skill or we need to bring someone in. I think that's an extremely unique approach because it allows us to stay onshore if we have some sort of compliance requirement to be onshore. If we can go near shore or offshore to meet different financial metrics or different needs, or you have offices internationally and you'd like someone that's in the European time zones, it allows us to really build a model that says, let us not just go get the right technical skill, let's make sure that skill also is the right personality, right? And I think that's a really key component in how you go about it. And then the last one I know you asked for four, I'm only going to give you three. I think these are the highlights. The last one is when we kick off a project, I think that's an extremely unique process. I have a saying that I always tell everyone, which is, if a project starts wrong, it ends wrong. And so when we push out proposals, one of the pushbacks we get from clients all the time is why is there 2 weeks from signature to kickoff? And that's because, we take there's two things when you're doing a project that are really important, which is resource transition and validation steps. And I feel like a lot of times in projects, everyone rushes to get going and they miss that resource transition where we take all that information and we transition it to the other team, to the other people, to the other organizations. And then how is that team validating that they're doing it correctly? And I think if you really were to go in and drill in, and if I were to open up the workflow for all the steps that are required to kick off a project, it's over 73 steps that it takes for my team to actually kick off a project. Wow. That they have to go through. And there's validations and contracts and internal SLAs and SLOs that people are having to honor to do these different things. So I think if you look, it's this real desire to create an organization that can do high quality, transparent work for the client base.
That's incredible. So, let me make sure I caught those appropriately. So transparency, size and scope, and then your unique onboarding process. I would
Yes,
add a
sir.
fourth one just in my dealings with you and your organization is you guys do the right thing by clients. Like we've had situations where, um, there's been, scope changes, there's been, project changes that have happened. And, for a lot of organizations, and, don't get me wrong, it's still probably a change order, but for a lot of organizations, that's where they make their bread and butter. And I haven't seen that with your organization. So
We don't do change.
I'll throw that in there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
change control is something we avoid like the plague. We do not think that that is of a value to clients. And again, that goes back to that I kind of loop that in with that transparency because
Yeah.
again, if you go out and you get these bids, they'll go in and they'll bid it low. They'll bid it on the lowest side that they think that project could possibly be, win it, and then be able to come in and go, oh, well, we didn't recognize that it was going to be like this. So here's a change control and here's a change control.
Yeah.
And so they set this expectation of one price, but by the end of the project, they've been hit with a few things of changes. So I think that's perfectly great to call out on its own, but I think in my mind, I've lumped that into that. Our pricing may not be as cheap as others sometimes, but a lot of times it's just because we're giving you the honest answer, not the answer you want to
hear. Yeah. I'd rather be that way too. That's something we share. So
yes, sir.
I definitely appreciate that approach. So I know you guys are doing a lot of different things, so there may not be a single answer to this, but what's your ideal client profile? What type of business are the best fit for SimpliMeta?
There is truly is an ideal client. To your point, we really can work with anyone. So we can take a little 3 or 4 hour project that on-demand engineering actually makes that something we can do where a lot of the VARs, they're not capable of taking on something that small. But the ideal client for us is going to be on the larger mid-market to the enterprise side that has some sort of a compliance standard and a light IT team. Notice I said light. We're not really, again, because we're not a help desk. We're not someone that you can literally just outsource and walk away. Where we do the best is where we can truly partner with internal resources and kind of partner one of our high level engineers with some sort of a resource in that company. And that's really where I think we're able to bring the greatest value. That same mid-market to large enterprise, we're able to go in and do, like field services. Those organizations have 50, 60, 70 sites. And we're able to go in and just take over the entire management of, hey, can you go place a printer at our office in here? And can you run one cable or set up a desk setup for a new employee in our New York office? And so those organizations really can, benefit from someone that can come in and handle all the locations across the country and bring in some of that engineering. And at the whole time, know that everything in our company from the top down is overseen by ensuring we're following some great policies and procedures from a CISO and a compliance officer. So that really plays well in that mid-market to enterprise space. That is definitely the ideal, but we can, to your point, work up and down spectrum.
What do you define? Everybody's got a different definition. What do you define as mid-market or small enterprise?
If you go and you were asked Jessica Dyer, who runs field services, she would tell it to you based, just like you said, there's different answers. She would tell it to you with how many locations, and that's all she cares about. So
sure.
Pretty much anyone with more than 20 locations, you will save money over the course of the year outsourcing that to us and letting us do that field services. If you look at any of those jobs independently, maybe not. But if you look at it across the entire year, we're going to be able to benefit you. If you look at that from Sean's perspective and our engineering and app dev components, right? It's going to be an organization who has a IT department that has budgets and pre-planned projects, right? So when I look at enterprise, I used to work for a company that had 300 employees, but they were $1.3 billion. Is that an enterprise company or a mid-market, right? Because again, going back to that stat.
Yeah.
So again, if you look at enterprise and larger mid-market, they actually create annual budgets for their IT departments.
Yeah.
And sometimes even multi-year budgets, right, that they might be managed to. If a company is able to go in and go, hey, we're going to sit down and come up with a budget. We're going to do these 6 or 7 projects. That allows my personal skill that I bring into those types of clients. I can sit down and go, okay, well, we should do this project first, and let's do this, and let's budget that. And I can actually help you create some of those buckets. Again, that experience of having to create those budgets on the enterprise side. And so instead of looking at it a dollar, it's going to be if they're big enough to actually be creating budgets and know that they're able to fund those programs for their customer and their internal staff. Once you're in that smaller mid-market and small business, you and me, a lot of times we make that decision then. We need to do a project. Can we afford that project now, right? Does that fit the today budget versus going, you can do these projects whenever you want. We've already kind of set this aside for the IT department. Right. So again, I hate to kind of not give you a straight answer, but If you are planning your IT and it is a proactive, thought out process, that puts you more in that enterprise side.
Is there anything that's too small for you?
Not really.
Okay.
You know, we might get so be priced out if it's too small, right? But as
Sure.
far as being able to take it on, we do just like you've seen with you guys. We typically, the smallest block of hours I think we've ever sold was 5 hours. Um, do I want to be writing, that kind of paper and trying to do that? Sure, probably not. But if it's the right thing to do for the client, the right thing to do for our partners, then we're absolutely going to jump in and do what it takes.
Makes sense. So talk to me. You mentioned field services a couple of times, right?
Mm-hmm.
For me, that means nationwide smart hands, or I guess that you're even going internationally now. Describe for the folks who are listening, a little more about your field services group.
Yeah. So the field services group, we kind of break it into a handful of different types of projects that they do. So for us, Smart Hands is going to be going out and potentially just pulling out a laptop and doing some sort of a screen share. It's going to be hooking into a piece of equipment or logging into a server, right? So it's going to be something on those components. Structured cabling jobs, those are going to typically be multi-day. We're building out an office. We're building a new office, building a new area of an office, but they're typically going to be measured in larger projects. We have our services team, which is just doing any sort of break fix, MACD that the clients might want to have. So again, it's a very big component. So when we talk about that, one of the areas that I really try to highlight is I don't think most companies have really thought about what is their expense to take care of the remote offices. And what I mean by that is have they really talked about the fact that every time they're like, hey, we're going to install some new access points at all of our offices. So they take that guy out of the office, they put him on a plane, they fly him there, they get him a hotel, they pay us per diem. Sure, they might have done the math on that component, but what about all the projects he can't do because he's not at his desk working, right? What about some of those soft costs and those leaks that you're having out of the business because everything else that guy was working on got put on hold just so he can go climb a ladder and change out an access point, right? And so that is one of the areas I really wish I could talk to clients about and be like, if you have 20 plus sites, I mean, it holds true lower too. It just gets a little harder. But if you have 20 plus sites and you're outside of a region where you can drive in and out of all those locations in one day, you should really sit down and do some math and determine if paying someone to go out and do that work for you and manage that whole component is going to help your organization stay ahead of projects, on budget, on time throughout those components. That's one of the areas that we continue to educate our customers on. We have a great client that about a year ago they sole sourced everything from us about a year ago. What they were doing beforehand is they were hiring companies in each region. So every office had a different company that they would call, right? And they would have to then manage, those guys would upload their photos to this portal, and this company would upload the photos to that portal, and this company charges like this, and we'll only do these types of work. And they come to the conclusion of this is if I can just call one person and pick all of my offices, give you a general scope, know that you're going to get out there, it just provides such a great experience to those end customers, inside of those organizations and experience that IT department. It's been worth every conversation they've had. So that would be the one thing I really hope companies would look at when they look at their field services.
Yeah, especially those small IT departments that, the resources are constantly stretched thin, right? You've got a
Mm-hmm.
project list that the business is asking you for that might be 3 pages long, and you don't have enough time to do 1 page, and then you're going to go to pull yourself out of the field for a week to do a deployment project. It just doesn't.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, I completely agree, and I know we've had good success working with your team in those areas. Um, I guess the next one I want to talk about is security assessments. So obviously, cybersecurity is
Huge.
it's a huge topic, right? Um, what level of security assessments can you guys do with your compliance and security team?
Sure. We actually have a really broad range around security assessments and even just assessments in general of different things that we go about it. One of the first things when I talk about assessments that's unique and different in the marketplace compared to what you hear from a lot of people is my very first question is, who am I making the assessment for? I can go and do an assessment of, your company. I'll just pick on you. I can do an assessment and then give you that report and give Bill on your operations team that same report. Bill may love it and you may hate it, or you may love it and he may hate it, because y'all are both looking for different things for different purposes with different goals. And so
Sure.
assessments to me are not a one size fits all type of component. It is something that needs to be customized to what it is that you're trying to get out of the assessment in the end. And that's an extremely important component. So just taking just security assessment alone, there's kind of two ways we attack that. One is on the technical side. That's engineering. An engineering and a technical security assessment is going to be things like logging into your switches and routers, logging into your Active Directory, logging into servers, logging into switches. It's going to be getting into the components and basically coming back and saying, is everything configured right? Is everything put together right? Is everything documented right? And those types of security assessments. It's going to very much focus on the technology and the technology stack. I think these types of assessments are almost as important as the more policy and procedural based ones, if not even more so. CIS released the top 5 vulnerabilities. They did a public IP scan of every public IP in America last year and looked for passive threats that might be on those. The first 2 of the 5 were both nothing more than misconfigured equipment, not patched equipment. Right? It wasn't a bad policy. It wasn't a bad procedure. It wasn't some employee clicking on a link. It was misconfigured egresses. Mm-hmm. And that becomes a very huge component. And so I tell people all the time is the crappiest firewall in the world configured correctly will outperform the greatest firewall in the world configured improperly. And so you'd be shocked the amount of times that we go in and do assessments for organizations. We went into a small, highly compliant organization, and they had an any rule on a firewall in one of their offices, basically saying anything in and anything out is allowed. So basically, they just had a paperweight racked up in their server rack doing nothing, and they had no idea. And so, and even then, they passed their compliance audits because the compliance audit had more to do with the policies and procedures. Mm-hmm. And so, one of the things I want to highlight is there's a big difference between being secure and being compliant. That's not the same thing. I can be perfectly compliant and not be secure. I can be secure and not be compliant. So you've got the technical ones where they're really going to focus on the equipment. How is it put together? How is it configured? How is it, being managed? And then there's the, more of the traditional compliance security assessments where we're going to come in and really look at the business practices around that. We're going to do tabletop exercises where we make up scenarios and go, okay, guys, this thing just happened. How would your company currently handle that? Make them literally walk through fake scenarios. They're called tabletop exercises. We're going to walk through tabletop exercises to tell you whether you're truly secure, whether you're truly able to do that. We can get into the policies and procedures of the documentation and all of those components. So assessments are a great place to start. And I would hope that most clients take that very seriously and take assessments seriously. I know you're hearing tons of sayings. I work a lot with these little zingy sayings in my head. So it's less marketing. It's more to keep me focused. But, one of the things, another one I say all the time is you don't know where you're going if you don't know where you are. Yeah. And that's a real hard thing to do is to go know what you need to do to fix an environment. You're not really sure that you may have one firewall with an any allowed feature on it, or you have one process that was written and it's a great process and it has a policy, but the policy itself isn't being enforced, or the process is being bypassed because no one likes it. And all these different types of things. It becomes so important to understand and assess your offices, your buildings, battery backups. That's one of the things. Every site we go to, we're going to check the battery backup to see if it's working. Whether you asked us to or not, we're looking at it because almost every time it's that battery's been dead for years because you're supposed to replace them every 3 years. And we'll go in and be like, when did you replace your UPS last? They'll go 8 years ago. I'm like, that battery is probably bowed on the inside. The acid's probably burned out on it at this point. So kind of a long answer to that. But I think that's, when I look at assessments, it's such a core part of how we do our business and how we're able to look at an advisor like you, John, and go, here is our operational and technical advice to you on some of the things this client can be looking at and managing. And that's that true transparency and partnership that we want to have with our organizations and you guys.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. One of my favorite sayings is you can't manage what you can't measure, right? And I think what you're doing right here with these assessments is helping with that as well, right? You're giving them a measurable, deliverable document that they can then measure their progress against. And if ever audited or if they ever have an event, they'll have something where they can show this is where we were and this is where we're going, and they can show meaningful use. So
absolutely,
certainly appreciate that. So I know you guys are doing the security assessments, but when you've got a customer who maybe needs some security strategic direction, or if they need to, need help with building out a security plan, is that something you guys can work with as well?
Absolutely. So we would love to be able to come in and help with, a strategy where you guys already have a general idea of what you're trying to do. You're going to hear, I'm going to ask the why. I want to understand why that's your strategy, why you chose to go that way, just to ensure that we can meet those expectations before we get into that offering. But, that's probably one of those areas where we would actually come in and say, let's be a fractional CISO, let's be a fractional compliance officer, and let us just take on that strategic leadership role of driving those things. We have a lot of clients that use that team to do both big strategic components, like, hey, I just run my compliance practice for me. I don't know what I'm doing. Please do it. Down to more myopic components. We're like, hey, we are great with compliance, but, and John, I think one of your clients actually, we had this conversation with them. They said, onboarding vendors is a nightmare, right? The process, the time it takes, the forms it takes. And so we can come in and go, you don't need me to help you with your compliance SOC 2s and, CMMCs or whatever it is here, but you want me to help manage a component of your SOC 2, like a vendor management and vendor vetting and risk management components. We're able to come in and go, we can build a practice around that specific component, right? Where we can come in once a month and do all your vendor management or all your risk reviews or your gap analysis or whatever component you might want on a more myopic standpoint. And that's why we have in-house our own compliance officer and our own CISO. They're not just doing it for us, they're doing it for our clients as well. And I think that's really an important value that we're adding. And one of those areas where we're kind of, eating our own dog food, right? We're not just using them external, we've used them internal to run all of our internal policies.
Yeah, and I think that's also a differentiator for you, going back to the beginning of our conversation. One of the other areas that I know we've worked with your team, we've got a couple of active projects, and it's a growing area, is AI readiness, AI software development projects. Describe your capabilities there and maybe what you're seeing in the marketplace.
So I'm actually going to catch one of the words you said before I give the description. So sure. Readiness is going around a lot right now. I think you probably see an advertisement from 100 companies going, let us do a co-pilot assessment for you, or a co-pilot readiness for you. Mm-hmm. And so someone called me the other day and said, Ryan, can you do a co-pilot assessment? I said, what are we making sure you're ready for? And they went, well, for co-pilot. And I said, for co-pilot to do what? They're like, to be ready. And I was like, we're going in a circle here. What do you want it to be ready to do?
Yeah.
And they said, well, we're going to determine that after the readiness. I'm like, I don't understand how you think I can make sure you're ready for something I don't know what you're doing. I have found that those readiness reports are very nice and they give a lot of great information. I'm not saying there's not value in them, but what I am now watching is companies paying and getting those readiness assessments and then looking back at that same company and going, thank you so much. This document's beautiful. Now we have this idea of what we want to do with Copilot. And they go, oh, we need you to do a discovery. And the client goes, but you just did a readiness. And they go, well, we didn't know what we were getting it ready for. And that is something that we've actually gotten 2 or 3 clients to come and use us for co-pilots because of that exact frustration. I thought a readiness was the discovery. And it's like what they're doing is making sure that you don't have any major data leaks. They're making sure that you have the right co-pilot licenses. They're making sure you have the appropriate products to support it. So they're doing some of these things, but these things would be done inside of a discovery as it is anyways. So our advice to our clients and our kind of process is to, again, do those discoveries. We want to get in, look at your environment, look at your data, look at your goals. And so describing our process around AI development, we love to get people on the phone, and you've heard me say this, is I want the dream. Forget about reality, forget about what I can do, what I can't do. Let's not try to get into the limitations of Copilot versus Llama versus ChatGPT versus DeepSeek, which I don't know if you saw all the news with DeepSeek, but I don't want to start with those limitations. We want to start by going, just give me the dream. Let us tell you whether that can be done with AI. Let us tell you whether that's something that is within the feasible, deliverables. And then we can tell you kind of very quickly whether that's a ginormous effort or a smaller effort. But then once we have that, we can come back to you and go, now let us do this, this $5,000-$6,000 discovery, whatever it ends up being. Now let us come back and do this discovery with the basis and understanding that we need to make sure you're ready and discovering for this specific solution. And we're having a lot more success with that quality, that transparency component by going, we're going to put this together and give it to you. And going to that unique differentiators, we don't want to price that with a project that is undefined at this point. We want to give you a discovery, tell you what it would take to make your dreams come true. That is an independently paid engagement. We're going to give you a completed document. You can use that document for all I care to go price against me. You paid for this independent. It is your document that is giving you the general timeline, the general effort, some of the high-level securities, the architectures, the product development tools that you would then be able to go and use, and go elsewhere if you so chose. And to me, that's that transparency that goes, let's do this separately. What we see a lot of people do in the development space is they'll say, hey, you're going to sign this proposal for 50 grand, and we're going to do this project for you. We're going to do the discovery phase. And just like if you remember when Fiverr was coming out, John, you'll remember this kind of same terminology. it'll have a line that says, after we do the discovery or after we do the initial assessment, we have the right to adjust this pricing to match.
Yeah.
And that's typically buried somewhere in the terms and conditions. And so they sell it to you at $30,000. And I do think they have all intents that it'll be $30,000. But inevitably, that discovery phase, they go, oh my God, you told me you only had 1 terabyte of data. It turns out you have 20 terabytes of data. That drastically changes the picture. But that's not how the customer sees it. The customer goes, well, wait a minute, I can't go to my leadership and tell them that I need 50,000. I was only approved for 30.
Yeah.
And to me, that just feels like we're just sticking everyone in this tough position versus going, let's just decouple the component, do the discovery, done, paid, here. Now let's go in and now let's bid on the rest of it. So I think that's kind of where our approach has come. Our development team has done some really, really cool projects. We've worked with some sporting organizations on their readiness for each of their games. And so they have a giant dashboard. In fact, that program actually started with our compliance officer. So our compliance officer went into a large sporting organization and they said, we have no idea how we're getting ready for games. We have no idea. IT is not talking to facilities. Facilities isn't talking to ticketing. Ticketing's not talking to marketing. Everyone's doing their own thing. And we're kind of just getting a little lucky that we haven't had a massive issue where someone's disconnected. And so we went in and interviewed each department head and said, what does it take to start a game? Took all that for every department and then created an application called Evergame that they're then able to see every game that's going to happen this season and the percentage of close that they are with each of the policies and procedures that must be completed to prepare them for that game. That's probably like one of my favorite projects we've done of late because it's a very untraditional software development process. It's such an internal workflow component, right? And just being able to create visibility into an internal process. I don't think that starts, and I don't think that is successful if we hadn't done the compliance, the policy and procedural thing first, right? So I think that's a great area where it shows that we can take these individual departments in the business and bring them together to make each better than they would be separately.
Well, and I think, beginning with the end in mind, identifying the outcomes early on that the customer is looking for and documenting that so you have success criteria you can measure against. I've had
Absolutely.
several customers and not that have done software projects, not that we were involved with, not that you were involved with, but where they'll get 3/4 of the way through the project and need to make a change, and then all of a sudden the clock starts ticking again, or the dollars and cents, it ends up being 2x, 3x what they expected it to be. I had one financial services customer that I think they spent $1.5 million creating a platform, and they ended up walking away from it because it was never delivered properly or never
Absolutely.
delivered in the way that they needed it to be. So
We work
I
with a
appreciate
logistics
that
company.
approach.
Yeah, we work with a logistics company that had a 5-year project to roll out an Oracle product, but they had to do a lot of customization around it. Their budget over the 3 years was $5 million. They shut it down at $9.3 million. Never got it. By the way, it never worked. And I think when you look at some of those projects, those are even different. I don't know about yours, but in the case that I'm talking about, they actually just went straight into doing work. They said, well, the customer says we want to do this, so we need to start by building this. So they just built it. Right? So they just all of a sudden built this module and then another module and then went, oh, well, crap, when we built this originally, no one told us it needed to do this thing over here. So now we got to redevelop this. And so what had happened was that very first, we'll just kind of call it a module that they developed, actually got redeveloped probably 5, 6, 7 times. They had to just start over because they go, well, we didn't know about that. Well, we didn't know about that. And that's where a lot of that comes from versus going, we have made a plan. We know when the budget money's needed. So you can go to your CFO and go, we're going to need $1 million, right? We're going to need it at these times and these months. Here's the billing term. And it gives that just really good transparency. It says we should be fairly accurate with what we've given you as far as this goes for the client. So I have to continue to say transparency is just such an important component.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, we've talked a lot about what you guys are doing today. What do you have on the roadmap? What's new and exciting and upcoming for SimpliMeta?
So there's 2 areas. One I already kind of dropped a little bit on. One of those areas is we are making a very big effort to become a global field services organization. And I want to be able to use the marketing term most of world. I don't know what that means, but marketing people keep using it and I like it. So I would like to be able to claim most of world by end of 2026. I think that's a really big thing. We have a lot of global customers that work with us. We're doing some projects with Yamaha and some others where they want us to support more and more. And they've looked and said, we'll be patient while you build out those components and give you that opportunity. And so we're trying to lean into some of those relationships and build this more global approach where we can do this same kind of field services component for our global organizations as well. So that's one area that I'm really excited about and having some serious focus on. And another areas is to do a lot of what we're doing, the management of all these engineers and being able to present those to the clients and manage the blocks of hours and manage all these what might be small projects and big projects. And this one has a PM and this one doesn't. All the confusion that could come in from engaging us into your organization. We wanted to create a single place where leadership can come in and measure our success, where there'll be measures, metrics dashboard where all the projects, how many tasks we have that are past due, what's our average time on projects, all these different stats that might be important to them. Able to create new tickets, projects, field services requests, see your whole team of engineers, pull another engineer out of the pool of engineers if you needed to, schedule appointments and discovery times with those engineers. So we really want to be able to put what we're calling it as BOSS, Business Operating System and Support. And our goal is to have a beta release out this summer of BOSS to a handful of clients with a full release of that by the end of the year. To manage the entire aspect and give you that one place to log in and have complete visibility in absolutely everything we're doing for your company.
Fantastic. Well, I look forward to and probably we may talk about betaing some of that internally for us as well.
Yeah, y'all are actually on some of the things that are specific for supporting your organization. Y'all are already beta testing some of that internal stuff. So you guys are obviously high on our list.
There. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ryan, first of all, thank you for the time today. Really appreciate you sitting down with me. Love working with you in the organization. Thank you again for your time.
All right, man. Thank you so much.
All right, for those who are tuning in, hopefully you found value in the information that was shared today. SimpliMeta being a good partner of ours here at TruPoint. We do a Talking Tech every month. Please be sure to tune in. You can like and share right here on the page. And if you're finding us through the newsletter, go ahead and look for the long version on our YouTube page as well. Thank you. Have a great day.